Welcome to this week's travel tip. This week's travel tip will be taking us to presidential museums. This will actually be a three-part series, and on the first part, we will be talking about Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon, and George H.W. Bush. We have been to many of the presidential museums, and many are a part of the National Archive systems. It depends on what president and when they were president, whether it's part of the National Archive system. Those do have a friend membership, and when you pay for the entrance to one, you have unlimited entrance to all the others for 1 year, which is an amazing buy. I want to start out in Simi Valley, California, at the Reagan Presidential Museum and Library. Prepare to be overwhelmed. Not only is this museum top-notch, but visitors may also board Reagan's Air Force One, see an actual plank of the Berlin Wall, and stand at the memorial site, final resting place of the 40th president and his wife, Nancy. The museum presents the glory days of this great American in 24 galleries covering 100,000 square feet of space. The gifts from world leaders are some of the most impressive items on display. Also see Reagan's saddle collection and an Irish pub. Sam 27,000, the Air Force One on display, is a Boeing 707 used by President Richard M. Nixon, Presidents Ford, Carter, H.W. Bush, Clinton, and G.W. Bush. President Reagan flew over 660,000 miles in the Flying White House. How the airplane landed in the museum is a story in itself. Motorcade vehicles encircle the aircraft. Learn more about Reagan's historic 1984 landslide victory, where he won 49 of the 50 states, receiving 59% of the popular vote and 525 of the 538 electoral votes. While one passes through the different rooms, the resounding voice of President Reagan through the speaker system is inspiring and heartwarming, and actually I fought back tears almost in every room just hearing him speaking. A plaque placed on an exterior wall quotes Reagan's oath of office. He did what he promised. The museum is as classy as the man it honors, and going there will intensify the patriot in you. Steve bought me an American flag that was flown at the grounds on my birthday. The gift shop shipped it overnight to me the following day. It comes in a beautiful wood flag box. Call the gift shop to order one for yourself or as a special gift for any Ronald Reagan fan. As a side note, we went and visited the California Catholic Mission in Carmel. It was at this mission that I wanted to see Padre Sarah's Bible. Ronald Reagan had placed his hand on this historic Bible at his swearing-in ceremony as governor. Sarah represents the state of California in the U.S. Capitol Statuary Hall. Sculptor Ettore Cadorin's 7-foot-tall masterpiece was unveiled in 1939 and has Sarah holding a model of the Carmel Mission. If you haven't been to the missions in California, you're missing a real treat. Interestingly enough, talking about Bibles, Vice President Michael R. Pence placed his hand on Ronald Reagan's Bible, open to 2 Chronicles 7:14, when he was sworn into office on January 20, 2017. The next president that we will cover is Richard M. Nixon, and we went to his presidential library and museum in Yorba Linda, California. Presidents Ronald Reagan, George Bush, Gerald Ford, and Richard Nixon attended the dedication on July 19, 1990 of the $21 million library. Initially a privately funded museum, it merged into the National Archive system on July 11, 2007. Nixon appeared on the cover of Time magazine more than anyone else in history has so far, 54 times. A copy of each magazine hangs on the wall near the entrance, adjacent to an immaculate hallway lined with American flags leading to the main gallery. Campaign trail memorabilia from decades of Republican campaigns and Nixon family mementos represent a significant amount of the contents. A crate in which a giant panda was shipped to the U.S. from the Peking Municipal Revolutionary Committee in the People's Republic of China is even there. Sit on a couch in a time period decorated mock living room to watch the Nixon-Kennedy presidential debates on a black and white TV. My favorite section of all presidential museums is the Head of State Gifts Gallery. In the center room of Nixon's exquisite gifts are statues of world leaders he met, including Britain's Winston Churchill, Egypt's Anwar Sadat, Israel's Golda Meir, France's Charles de Gaulle, Soviet leaders like Nikita Khrushchev, who's only 5'4", and Leonid Brezhnev, and China's Mao Zedong. A quote from Nixon on the wall explains his selections. They are leaders who have made a difference. not because they wished it, but because they willed it. Painstakingly created by Elliot and Ivan Schwartz, the true-to-life statues were dressed in actual clothing and coated in special materials to appear bronze. Look for the crystal flask containing a few ounces of oil from the first oil well in Saudi Arabia, presented to President Nixon on June 7, 1974, by His Royal Highness Prince Fahd. The Vietnam War section is heart-wrenching and includes a set of North Vietnamese issued pajamas of a first lieutenant in the U.S. Air Force who was imprisoned in Hanoi, North Vietnam at the Hao Lo prison, also known as Hanoi Hilton. A brick from the Hilton wall was brought to the U.S. from a Vietnamese Air Force captain also imprisoned there. Tour the home filled with family heirlooms where Nixon was born as the second son in a Quaker family. Nearby at the attractive grounds with landscaped flower gardens, reflection pools, and fountains, see Richard and Patricia Nixon's gravesites, along with his presidential helicopter. This is one of the best presidential museums, primarily because of the great number of hard-hitting, controversial issues that Nixon faced as president. For example, the Vietnam War, relations with China, the lunar missions, and Watergate. Nixon served in the Navy during World War II. He served as both a U.S. congressman and a senator from California. He then served as vice president to Dwight Eisenhower from 53 to 61. John F. Kennedy narrowly defeated Nixon in the 1960 presidential elections. Nixon won the presidency in 1968, beating Hubert Humphrey. He became the nation's 37th president. The early news of the Watergate break-in did not hinder his landslide re-election for president in 1972. However, under pressure from all fronts, Nixon resigned on August 8, 1974, thwarting impeachment. Richard Nixon died on April 22, 1994, preceded in death by his wife the previous year. And what's interesting is that we actually were able to see his handwritten resignation letter while we were visiting the Jimmy Carter Presidential Library, which we will include in one of these future Saturday travel tips. Last stop in today's travel tip takes us to Texas and to the campus of Texas A&M University in College Station, where we visited the George Bush Presidential Museum. We've actually been there twice. Gifts of state and a Patriot missile are on display there. One of the most interesting parts is the mock White House Situation Room, where guests participate in a briefing. The actual room is located in the basement of the West Wing of the White House. Bush's military service is presented along with many of his service items. His leadership in the Central Intelligence Agency is highlighted. Born in Milton, Massachusetts on June 12, 1924, George Herbert Walker Bush was destined to be a leader. As of June 1943, he was the youngest naval aviator, and over the course of his military service during World War II, he received the Distinguished Flying Cross, 3 Air Medals, and the Presidential Unit Citation. Following his admirable service in the military, he furthered his education with a bachelor's degree from Yale University. With help from his influential father, he was able to advance from a sales clerk job at an oil company to owning a drilling company, making him a wealthy West Texas oil man. He and his wife, Barbara Pierce, had 6 children. His mind focused on politics led him to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives as the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, the ambassador to the United Nations, director of the Council on Foreign Relations, the chair of the G7, and the U.S. vice president. Ultimately, he became the 41st U.S. president. When Iraq invaded Kuwait in 1990, as commander-in-chief, he assembled a strike force. This event led to the pinnacle of his presidency, Operation Desert Storm. The USS George H.W. Bush, CVN 77, was commissioned on January 10, 2009. Both father and son were on board the U.S. Navy's 10th and last Nimitz-class supercarrier that day. A set of our DVD series, A Creation Seminar, was donated that day to the ship's library by a group of naval officers. American history. Learn it, love it, appreciate it. Thank you.